Ubisoft studios can have a tough time. Being under such a big umbrella can leave you fighting for your own identity. Assassin's Creed, Far Cry and the latest massive entertainment series, The Division, can appear to share many traits on face value. Dig a little deeper though, and it becomes clear this Swedish team and their very own Snowdrop engine can bring much more to the Ubisoft fold. Now, the infamous first entry reveal was one of many titles this generation that set lofty goals upon first appearance. Here, with the sequel to that 2016 MMO, they have a chance to remedy one of the game's biggest gripes. The endgame, in fact. Even in this beta, a specific endgame mission will be made available today, or yesterday when this video goes up. Thanks to a long weekend on my real job, I get a chance to taste all the console versions today with an aim to answer if this is a step up from New York or a whitewash of an expansion. Let's take a bite of this new Division. Now, right from the off, impressions are of a game not wanting to stray from its origins. The initial menu system, loading and even intro cinematic all feel like DLC rather than a direct sequel. This feeling never left me throughout my multiple hours here across 4 versions. Now, don't get me wrong, improvements, changes, new areas and more are all on show, but they feel as if a wax and a polish has been applied here rather than a formula breaking augment. That Fitbit watch, swooped in camera and collection of weapons all grant a feeling of coming home more than moving house. This is good, as within the first few minutes or so, those previous battle moments in Manhattan all come flooding back, which is a pleasant surprise. The gunplay is fluid, contextual and satisfying most of the time. It can leave you double-clicking sprint or X to grab cover more often than is welcome at times, yet still feels compelling and snappy enough to not grate during these early taster missions. Expect the same HQC, city jaunts, fog-filled streets and suicidal enemies to suck up your ammo in between conveniently placed supply boxes ahead of each kill box that follows as you walk into it. Gameplay design and mechanic does not appear to have strived forward since our last divisional adventure. This level of familiarity is not unconscious, as I am sure they have tried to strive to keep everything feeling more of the same, yet better. My concern from these early missions and taste is they may have played it slightly too safe for my liking, but I know that I'm not this market's main target, so that could be completely off base. But mission flow, combat mechanics, story beats all portray a cookie cutter affair from the off. And by my 4th console run through, I was not sure if I was sad or happy to be wrapping it all up. The final game will of course offer much more from start to finish, with that last part being a core element they have set out to fix. And the final release will allow me to confirm if I have yet another saviour run in me or not. Now, moving over to the graphics, resolution and performance info many of you came for may also paint a somewhat familiar affair. Starting with the base consoles, we see a fully locked 1920 by 1080p resolution on the PS4, which closely mimics what we saw last time out. A dynamic solution was alluded to in the patch notes back then, so it's likely in play here, but I can say that from my early look and multiple counts in heavy battles, I see no sign of it dipping below that, but if it does, moments are so fleeting as to never concern yourself. The base Xbox One here is certainly running a dynamic solution though, with clear moments in battle of dropping down to 900p, but I must say that just like the last game, it stays at a native 1920 by 1080 enough to come close to the PS4 more often than not, with a few sub HD counts cropping up where it's short-lived it seems. The visual makeup of these two dominant console formats is also a case of spot the difference. Occasional terrain details is different or better on Xbox One than PS4, and sometimes LOD can change and shadows can pop in at different times, but there were a lot of bugs in this beta, so I am suspecting that this is quite early code, and it really does look like a beta because you've got obvious things like hair clipping through heads of rigs and obviously hands. They're not even contacting the models of the guns, so there's obvious issues here that need to be addressed at later points. Texture detail, materials, reflections, all the screen space reflections are evident across the game. It's one of the key elements of the title and its global illumination system. It does use pre-computed light probes, basically cube maps of images across certain points and times of day, and it blends between them. But in addition, it relies heavily on that screen space reflection technique to bounce not only the visual quality, obviously the image it's bouncing, but also the colour and light bounce. This affects both interiors and exteriors quite severely and gives lots of irradiance across certain areas, obviously metallic surfaces, reflective surfaces, all rely on this light probe solution to give a bounce of light to certain areas, obviously the colour and the visual quality, and then it falls back to this if the screen space reflections are off screen. There's many areas in the game that uses, and in addition they use capsule proxies again like the first title when you're up against things like elevator doors or cars, and everything here seems to reflect and bounce light quite a lot, and it's one of a signature look of the Snowdrop engine. It looks excellent during this title. And they've perfectly captured, again, that look of a desolate, deserted and completely war-torn cityscape that's been completely isolated and left for dead. Lots of overgrown growth this time, and the beginning section does paint a very different picture to the first title. Lots of foliage, green grass, water pools, algae, lots of screen space reflections in water. And again, they've got that reaction there when you shoot the water, both the screen space reflections and the ripples across the water from bullets and people running through. It does look very good indeed, and they're still using that physical destruction, that procedural destruction in the game, but it doesn't appear quite as elegantly used here as the previous title. But maybe this is just a small section, but certainly not everything here destructs. It's certain parts. The glass break down in the back of the cars, for example, they certainly don't break down as often as they did in the first title. But seriously, the most important thing here is, can you still close doors? Well, are you ready? I'm going to check.
Agent in need of backup.
Oh, thank God for that. For a second there, I was panicking that this would be a downgrade moment, but they certainly haven't downgraded the central locking system on all these cars. It's still there. You can still shut doors as you slide along in combat, so that's good. That's a tick in a box. Whew. Anyway, moving on to the premium consoles, what do we see? Well, again, we see a similar looking title as the base consoles, but just much cleaner and more refined. Like I say, the resolution impact improves things like shadow quality. It's more stable, less jittery than it is on the base consoles, and I think the AO is also slightly better on these than it is on the base consoles as well. But resolution-wise, we see a difference yet again. I did get a couple of points where it looked like native 3840 by 2160, but I think that's the temporal AA reconstruction there, actually fiddling around with the image. Most of the time my counts came out at 3584 by 2016. Now, I'm not going to rule out a dynamic solution. I did get 3328 by 1872 a couple of times as well, so it probably scales somewhere around that level. It may hit 3840 by 2160 at the top end. I did, like I said, I did get a couple of counts staring at the sky in certain parts on the gun, so that might be its top out ceiling and its target, but majority of the time in combat I'm seeing 3584 by 2016. And on the Xbox One, I'm seeing 3840 by 2160 on the X, obviously. Now, this means that, again, it's likely a dynamic solution, but from the counts here, I didn't spot any points where it dropped below that. Certainly to the point where I could notice it as well. So if it does drop below native 4K, it's not something that I noticed very often. So that sees a significant boost yet again to the Xbox One X over the Pro. And visually, there's nothing really to split the two. Aside that, things like, you know, texture quality, material quality, LOD distance, shadows, cascade, reflection, screen space reflection quality, it all looks pretty much identical. Their temporal AA solution is something that I still find a little odd. It does a good job, and they look to be just working around the edges, so they're basically looking at geometry on sample points and not taking colour from their sample points of the pixel. You can see it a lot when it moves. You get an outline of the character, but you don't get the actual body itself, so it looks like they're only taking geometry and not touching the colour. So again, they're probably editing or masquerading their solution. They're using the EQAA solution on these consoles to just smooth out the edges of characters and objects moving, rather than worrying about blurring all the texture details. And that actually works because it's still quite a sharp game, even though it uses TAA. So they're definitely keeping the material quality as high as possible. But the Pro and the X look excellent on a 4K screen, with the X just winning out due to the fact that it has slightly better AA and certainly has a higher pixel count. So what leaves us with performance, and all 4 versions likely run an adaptive V-Sync, which allows the game to tear when it drops below its target of 30 FPS, 33 milliseconds, which it runs across all versions. There's no difference here. So comparing the PS4 to the Xbox One S, I didn't get any tears or any dips on the PS4 Pro. It's a locked 30 FPS right throughout play. Again, that headroom it's afforded there, I think there's certainly a bit more to give, and that is actually good because it gives you a rock solid performance, just pretty much like the original Division. Now, this is an online MMO, so I'm not going to say you're not going to get heavy dips when things like server load, balancing, just general code gets in the way. It's not really limited by its visual output and quality, but overall it's a very consistent and stable game. The Xbox One S is also very close behind. It tears a few times, nothing more than a few little dips here and there, and it can tear up and down the screen, but they're never prolonged and a very short span, certainly in the tested sections I've got here. So again, it's not anything to worry about, and it performs pretty much as you'd expect from the previous game, even though it doesn't look a significant leap over that. In fact, many elements of the title, like I already covered, look like just a rehash or a DLC of the original game. Certainly outside, they've made a huge change to the visual quality, the atmosphere and the feel of the city, but generally playing the game, it feels very, very similar indeed. And the PS4 Pro and the Xbox One X are exactly the same. They both tear. In fact, they both tear pretty close by, in fact, to each other. There's certain points in real-time cutscenes where they tear identically. And again, it's no more than a frame here or there. So over the course of playing all these sections here, I saw maybe 28 FPS as a low on the PS4 Pro and the Xbox One X. They seem slightly more unstable than the base consoles, but they are pushing quite a high resolution output, and I don't see any forms of checkerboard solution here, just that temporal AA. There might be something else going on, but it certainly looks just like a native resolution with all the general cutbacks on various MRT buffers and everything else going on that delivers the image on screen. Even though it's not a great looking title in comparison to the original, I don't think it's moved on leaps and bounds. It's still a consistent looking title, and it certainly has the player base that people want to dive into yet more of the Division, and I think you can be safe knowing that any one of these console versions will give you a solid performing title. If you have got a 4K screen, premium consoles do the job. If you've got a 1080p one, I don't think you're going to miss out on the S, or the Xbox One S, or the PS4. They both look and run great. I'll be looking at the PC version later on, and in all likelihood I won't be covering this title when it launches because I just don't get the views, and I don't think this is going to change significantly from here to then. So this is pretty much what you can expect when the title ships. If you like this or anything else put together, please share, like, subscribe, and follow me over on Twitter. But for now, I'm out, and I'll catch you on the next one.
If you're looking for Agent Kelso, she just left. I should have gone with her. But I'd only slow her down. I know you got your own problem.